I'm Ann Perez. I used to be a high school English teacher, and now I create professional learning like this. I'm joined today with colleagues Danielle Peck and Tanya White-Cross.
Hi, I'm Danielle, and as you know, I was also a high school English teacher, and now I'm happy to be here with you all. Today we are so excited to have Tanya join us, so I'm going to pass it over to Tanya to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tanya, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Coach for Michigan Virtual, and I am formerly retired from K through 12 administration with Detroit Public Schools Community District. I also currently, and for quite a few years now, have been involved in teacher preparation, and I'm glad to be here with Danielle and Ann today.
Thank you, Tanya. So as you know, we are doing our back to school series and we're really excited about that. Today's session is all about community agreements. So for our level setting today, we've taken an excerpt from an article called Using Community Agreements to Start the Year Strong by Kate O'Connor. We think community agreements are a great way to start the year strong. So the excerpt reads as such. The process of building community agreements communicates to students that even if we've just met, I trust them to know themselves best as learners, as people, and as participants in the space where we will treat each other with dignity. Community agreements allow students to build a set of expectations for themselves, the students who are there every day, and hold each other accountable for those expectations as they get to know each other better. Community agreements make it possible to center students' voices. The building of community agreements depends on them, their values, their needs, their strengths, and their constant growth. Tanya, we found this excerpt to be really powerful, and I'm curious about your initial reactions to this.
Well, a couple things that stand out to me about community agreements are that they are a wonderful way for teachers to remember that they can partner with students, and diversity, equity, and inclusion are build-ins to community agreements. So I love them for that reason.
Tanya, your response just got me thinking. I would love to know from your experience. Can you share a story about a time when you've created and used community agreements with your students?
Absolutely. So in the early 2000s, I attended a professional development workshop facilitated by an educator named Larry Bell. Mr. Bell hosted a high energy session where he spoke of the standardized test taking challenges of students referred to as at risk. He shared how he did not care for that phrase, which he would later take some action on to change. But in the interim, he said he had a strategy to help students improve their test-taking skills and shift from that stigma of being known as at risk. Mr. Bell went on to say how so many students were not performing well on standardized tests because they were getting stuck on instructions. In some cases, students were not moving beyond the instructions for certain questions, and in other instances, it was the overall test instructions that students often found lengthy and confusing. His solution was to introduce 12 instructional verbs commonly included in standardized tests. Larry said to teach students how they can overcome the intimidation of instructional verbs during test times by replacing them with a friendly phrase of everyday words. Then students could better understand what was expected of them on tests and ultimately enjoy an enhanced testing experience with better scores. Since this skill would take practice, I decided to welcome students to help define the test-taking words with me with everyday language so they would have greater attachment to the meanings during testing times, and I made large posters to help everyone remember those new phrases. To increase the students' level of comfort and awareness, I began to find other ways to inject these words and phrases into various areas of our regular classroom habits, such as on all assignments. And then I came up with another idea. And that idea led me to community agreements. Although I didn't have much trouble with classroom conflict, when there was an issue, it was usually a pretty big one. In those moments, I found myself exhausted trying to unpack and manage these bigger conflicts by myself, and I thought of a way to partner with students for help with two things in mind. Using those tricky test verbs we had collaborated on around finding friendlier phrases, and also when it came to class conflict, the students always had more firsthand information to offer. I shared my idea with each class around creating a community agreement using our 12 instructional verbs and our understanding of friendly phrases as a process to help us address our class conflict and make a plan to move beyond problems when they arose. I figured the more contact the students had with these words, these instructional verbs and friendly phrases, the easier it would be for them to embrace and then apply the meanings we'd developed. With this dual purpose in mind, a different community agreement was created by each class, and they were living documents with every student invited to exercise ownership to engage the conflict resolution process when the need presented itself. If I were teaching or working with students in a small group, for example, and I didn't observe those early conflict brewing elements, the class was empowered to help manage it by getting in front of it with our agreement process. Not only did these agreements help the students with their preparedness for conquering difficult test directions and instructions, but it also helped us have a respect and acknowledgement of diversity, equity, and inclusion in our learning environment before those concepts were as common as they are now. With our community agreements, we celebrated the contributions of diverse perspectives to help resolve our conflict. Our process was equitable as everyone had equal access to the opportunity of addressing any conflict. And finally, our agreement was inclusive, welcoming everyone's authentic voice to participate in this process with all their unique personalities and thoughts for solutions that mattered to us all. I found that I got a lot of use out of Larry Bell's PD workshop, and later I also found out that Larry helped the state of California replace the term at risk with the term at promise, as his verb list over the years came to be known as 12 powerful verbs. I in turn created an updated model of the community agreement where I referenced students relying on this conflict resolution process as at power. And thus this concept continues to have some giving ability.
Wow, at power. I think that is such a great phrase to use with your students. I really enjoyed that story, and one of my key takeaways is that community agreements can offer the opportunity for students to connect with instructional material in a deep and meaningful way. So you had students use those verbs, those vocabulary terms, in a way that I think would really help them understand because they're using them to connect with each other and create these agreements. I think that's amazing.
Thank you, Danielle. And if I could offer a takeaway, it would be for teachers to remember whatever framing or modeling you rely on to help you get your community agreement going, just remember that it's a partnership between you and your students, and it's an opportunity to collaborate and celebrate diversity, equity, and inclusion.
And just kind of building on that, Tanya, that idea of that partnership, in your story, just hearing that, I think a community agreement is the best way that we can tell our students that we see them, we value them, we trust them, and really it's putting our trust into action. What a powerful way we can show our students that we value them in our classroom.
So you might be wondering what's next? Well, first, we definitely recommend reading the article we mentioned earlier, which is Using Community Agreements to Start the Year Strong by Kate O'Connor. On this PD on a Page, we'll also have Tanya's resource for community agreements and some other reading that Tanya recommended, which is amazing. So again, you can access those on the PD on a Page. Tanya, thank you so much for being with us today. And to everybody listening and watching, thank you to you too. We hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time. Bye.